Hello, everyone. Welcome. I see many of you are joining. All right. I would like to introduce your host for this session today, Fernando. Fernando Hetiadra is an eclectic psychotherapist, an ICF Master Certified Coach, and a serial entrepreneur. He leads a global movement towards conscious living and healing through his visionary organizations Ignite Global, Ignite Mind, Evolving Temple, and Awaken Mind Guide. As ICF Program Director at Ignite Global 360, Fernando designs his leads cutting-edge accredited training programs for coaches and clinicians worldwide. He also developed the world's first ever ICF-accredited trauma-informed psychedelic integration practitioner qualification, setting a new standard in the field. His work continues to empower individuals and professionals to access deeper healing and human potential. Fernando, over to you.
Thank you, Lux, for the introduction. Hello, colleagues, coaches, professionals, therapists, those who are curious about topic coaching through transformation, as well as psychedelic integration. It's an honor to have all of you. So let us dive into this session today. So as we begin, we celebrate International Coaching Week with you, and at Ignite Global as an ICF accredited coach specific professional development provider. We are very happy to co-create with you, and like Luke's mentioned, as we continue our journey, our professional journey, coaching is taking many turns and evolving, and I think this is a good example of how coaching can go to the next level. So I'm very excited to celebrate International Coaching Week with you and discuss this topic, which is very close to my heart. As I do that, you are going to be one of the very first colleagues of ours who are going to know this know this news. Just yesterday at the ICF Bangkok chapter event celebrating International Coaching Week, Ignite Global, we received this award. This stands for Excellence in Coaching Education Award, the best ICF accredited coach education provider in Thailand. So I'm very humbled and honored, and thank you for being here and joining us. I invite you to share our success and our excellence together with us. All right, so with that, let us dive into our session. All right. So as you notice that this is an hour session, so I think we will have very limited time to interact with each other. So may I invite all of you to reflect with me? And if you have any questions, feel free to send them in the chat room. And if time permits, I will try to answer them. Continuing on, this topic today is neuroscience of true client transformation through psychedelic integrated coaching. So to many of you, psychedelic integration may be a new topic, and some of you may already aware, and maybe you're curious to find out how we operate within this space. And if you notice, today we are going to particularly look at psychedelic integrated coaching from a neuroscience perspective, focusing on true client transformation. As many of you, I believe, are professional coaches as we celebrate International Coaching Week. And I also am aware that we have many leaders, educators, psychotherapists, consultants in our network, or maybe you are simply curious, maybe you are a student. So let us look at the neuroscience perspective of true client transformation when we integrate the possibility of psychedelics. So moving forward, I also would like to mention that this is the second session of a series. Last Monday, we had another session where we focused coaching in the dark, revealing blind spots of true holistic transformation from a trauma-informed lens. If you are familiar with psychedelic integration, you may already have an understanding that psychedelic integration comes with many components. And one of them is the trauma-informed background. At the same time, for an example, spiritual aspects, the metaphysical, if not mystical aspects, clinical aspects, the medium of delivery, whether it is psychotherapy or coaching. There are many different angles to psychedelic integration, and one of them that we cannot miss out is the trauma-informed lens. It is absolutely very important. In case if you missed this session, the good news is that we went YouTube live with this previous session. So when we update you about this event later on after the event, we will be sure to incorporate the YouTube link that you can rewatch the previous session if you are interested. So let us now look at a few logistics. As you may notice, we are live at the moment on YouTube, and this session provides you with a CCE, Continued Coach Education hours, and just before the session ends, my colleague Leah will be sharing the link to register for the CCE. So feel free to enter your details and register so that we can provide you with the certification. And then also the slides that I'm using in this session will be available for you to download via the same link where you will be registering for CCE, so that if you're taking notes, you know how much of notes that you would need to take, as I will be sharing these slides. Right. And this is a self-reflective session, provided that this is a 60-minute session. I think going back and forth, interacting might not be the adequate time. So I invite you to reflect with me as we continue. And also, I would like to invite you to recognize that what we are doing here, or the focus here, is the healing, life enhancement, and spiritual development. So the information that we are sharing here is for education and harm reduction purpose. And you may already are aware that psychedelics are not fully legal in many parts of the world. So we do not promote any illegal activity. It's important that we approach these kind of practices with fullest responsibility. So the purpose of this session is education and harm reduction. Continuing on, I would also like to invite you to recognize those especially highly sensitive individuals that this session may contain contents of mental disorder, trauma, and similar mental conditions. So please engage with caution. So let's begin with the question. Most of us are professional coaches here, or aspiring professional coaches. So may I invite us to reflect on this question? When you started off as a professional coach, how did you envision transformation for your clients? I'm not necessarily expecting a direct answer. If you would like to share your thoughts in the chat room, you're most welcome to do. And what is most important is truly to reflect on this question. Why am I asking this question? Because many of us aspire to integrate clients in every potential angle. We intend to create a holistic practice focusing on client transformation, true deep transformation. And I also often see professional coaches, psychotherapists use these words. My practice is integrated. My practice is holistic, or I am a transformational coach. Now, when we use these adjectives, it's important that we are really fully aware of what they truly mean. And most importantly, not only what they mean, but also whether we are truly incorporating these elements into our practice. Otherwise, we are misled, and we might mislead our clients as well. And as we continue further, I would also like to share with you that we as professional coaches, most of us as professional coaches, we challenge our clients, right? We challenge our clients. We use powerful inquiry to evoke their awareness. And sometimes when we ask those powerful questions, it can be uncomfortable. So we as professional coaches know what it takes to operate in a place of uncomfort. So as we go through this session today, some of the sharing that I will present to you, and also some of the questions I ask you might make you feel uncomfortable. If that's the case, I invite you to speak to those places, speak to those parts of you and inquire, why do I feel uncomfortable in this space? So just like I'm sharing right away. So if some of us are using words like integrated practice, holistic, transformational practices, I think it is very important. Uh, Leah, Lux, may I invite you to help me with putting those who have noise mute, please. All right. And I also invite all of you to keep your microphones muted. Feel free to keep your camera open so we can see you. But when I'm sharing my screen, I only see myself. So feel free to send your insights in the chat room. Right. So the first question is, when you started your coaching practice, did you intend to become integrated, holistic, transformational practitioner? Are you using these words? And how aware are you that you are truly incorporating these components? Right. So today, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we are talking about true deep transformation. So of course, we need to first align ourselves with transformation. That's what we do with our clients. When a client uses a specific word, especially keywords, key emotions, key observations, we inquire, we try to understand what is it that means to client, right? So in this case, let's look at the Oxford language interpretation of transformation. So it is a thorough, dramatic change in form or appearance, right? I think most of us uh, intend to create a thorough and a dramatic change in our clients, especially in their form. And often when we are able to create, or when our clients create that dramatic, thorough change in them, the shift in them, they are not only changing their inner form, but also the outer form, which means the appearance as well. All right. So now that we all understand what transformation is, the next question I would like to invite you to reflect on is, how transformational is your practice? Especially focusing on the words thorough and dramatic. I think we don't have necessarily a scale or a gauge that we can use and say that, well, I am creating that transformation that I expect to do. Now, the transformation is actually a debatable word, even looking at this very ambiguous definition, if you notice, right? So transformation could be just a realization, maybe an aha moment, maybe a breakthrough, maybe finding a value, maybe finding a specific emotion, labeling an emotion, or finding a way forward. Anything can be counted as transformation. So please don't get me wrong. I think as professional coaches, psychotherapists, mentors, supervisors, we all create some transformation in our clients. Now, in this session, I would like us to talk about truly tangible transformation in terms of approaching, dramatically changing the form, especially the inner form. Now, for an example, if we simply look at something like certain behavior patterns, an individual, maybe one of your clients who smoke, right, who is smoking on a regular basis, would cognitively know, consciously know that smoking is damaging to their health, that stopping smoking is important. And they probably intend to do that. They probably intend to stop smoking. However, when they have the urge, when they're in the right moment, when the stress kicks in, or when they are among their colleagues or peers, they light up the cigarette and they start smoking, regardless of the fact that they are aware, cognitively, cerebrally, that they are aware that smoking is slowly killing them, if not, it's damaging them. They still continue to engage in this behavior, right? So, consciously knowing, is one thing, and being able to go from smoking to not smoking, you notice that there is a transformation that requires. And you probably start to recognize that it's not just only something that we can do just by thinking, just by having the awareness. It requires some inner alignments to change as well. So what I'm addressing as transformation today is that level of transformation, that they are able to really break away from certain serving behaviors, non-serving behaviors, and they are truly able to transform themselves in a way that goes beyond cognitive process. Now, if you think about coaching, coaching is a cognitive process, cerebral process. If you incorporate certain somatic practices, body focused practices, or psychosomatic practices, body mind connected practices, clients are actually able to break through from certain behaviors and cultivate new behavior, creating dramatic change, a thorough change, right? I'm talking about this kind of change, not just an aha moment, because an aha moment often is cognitive. It is just thought, it is just experienced through the mind. But our intelligence, our ability to operate in the world is not just only a result of our cognition, thinking, right? It goes beyond. There are certain unconscious alignments that we need to focus on as well. Now, when we talk about unconscious alignment, it's important that we first look at traditional coaching. Because when we talk about traditional coaching, when I mean traditional coaching here, I'm talking about something like the ICF coaching framework, ICF core competencies, for an example. So you are very well aware, according to ICF core competency, as a professional coach, you focus on here and to the future, here and now to the future. So if you're talking about unconscious patterns, or often unconscious patterns come from our past. It can be something that happened to us in the childhood. It can be some kind of a trauma experience. It can be an adversity. It can be something even beyond our lifetime, which means epigenetics, which means it could even be certain traits can be passed on to us through our ancestors. And these experiences form our being, how we show up in the world, how we react to certain situations, how we get triggered, and how long it takes for us to gain our senses back, and so on. So you are aware, when we focus on traditional coaching frameworks, the focus is from present to the future, from here and now to the future. We do not have the ability to primarily work in the client's past, specifically client's emotional past. So you are well aware of this. Now, may I invite you to think about the word integrative? Now, may I invite you to think about the word holistic? So if you're focusing on clients here and now and proceed to the future, you are starting to recognize that practice is not integrative. That practice is not holistic predominantly. It's very straightforward. All right. So let's look at now, as I mentioned, there are many unconscious ways that we behave without even our awareness. We don't know what we don't know, right? So in order for us to understand a bit about how we unconsciously behave, it's important we look at dynamics of trauma. As I mentioned, I'm not going deep in here, but I think this little introduction is absolutely important. Now, when we look at trauma, when some adverse experience, when we experience a challenging moment, in this case, this little boy being attacked by a dog, this is the traumatic event. And then our brain, our nervous system, our body, even our DNA store this information. Often when we have a trauma response, when we are responding to a trigger, it feels really painful. It's not the most safest or most comfortable space to be, but the trigger is telling us something. That means there is danger. Get yourself to safety, because we have experienced a traumatic event, and our body, our intelligence of our nervous system, our somatic system, the soma, store this information in our body. And it can be stored in even the covering cells of your nerve endings, or your veins, your tissues for that matter. Our body is extremely intelligent. Our body's primary focus is to safeguard us. So it stores trauma not to hurt us, but to safeguard us. It's a safety mechanism. It's a coping mechanism. So now this boy has grown up and he's walking outside, and then he sees a young child coming up with a pet dog. And just like as a little boy, he froze, which is one of the trauma responses. He freezes once again, because there is the trigger, which is a little dog. but he is responding to this trigger with the same reaction, which is the freeze response in this case. Now, what is interesting is that this freezing is unconscious. So you're probably starting to notice how I'm trying to connect the dots now. So often when we behave in a specific way, whether it is when we see a dog, we freeze, or we snap at a service staff, maybe at a supermarket or maybe at the airline counter, we lose our temper. When we actually do that, we see unfairness. We see that we are not safe, or we see that things are not moving in the direction that we expect. So we snap at them, which means the trigger is present, so that we react to it, which means there's an unconscious trauma response. And that is why at a later time, you wonder and sometimes feel a bit disappointed that it's not my true essence to act like that. But why did I lose my temper? Why did I snap at that staff? It's not their fault. It's because it's unconscious. So what I'm trying to really say here is that although we think cerebrally that we are aware of what we are doing, that most importantly, we are in control. The truth is that there are so many unconscious alignments that control us in a way that we are not even fully aware. And there are many different types of trauma responses. I put together a few of them here. And in the previous session, I discussed them a bit. So I'm not going to approach them right here because we're discussing something even more powerful today. So now when I mention trauma, there's about 70% of the global population, according to WHO study, that they have been exposed to a traumatic event. But the interesting thing is, however, the outcome of trauma, effects of trauma, like post-traumatic stress disorder and stressor-related disorders, we have a higher percentage in the same group that we study, about 78%. 70% of the people can recall traumatic experiences, but more than that, like 78% of the people experience stressor-related disorders or post-traumatic stress disorder. So that tells us something. That tells us that often we disassociate from the trauma because it was too powerful for our nervous system. We weren't able to really cope with it. So what our body intelligence did was to disassociate ourselves from that. This is freeze trauma response. Although we might not even recall a specific traumatic moment, we will still be affected by the outcomes of those things because we may have disassociated from those memories, for an example. And then ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Now, according to Center for Disease Control and Prevention in the US, studied 17,000 individuals from Caucasian neighborhood to see how many childhood adversities, childhood trauma are impacting them. Now, when we talk about trauma, often we think that these are things that happened to us that was devastating. It is absolutely accurate, but at the same time, on the other side, on the other hand, there are also certain trauma that is something that didn't happen to us. For an example, neglect. It can be neglected emotionally, or maybe we didn't receive our security needs to begin with as a child. So imagine, it's not only that things that happen to us traumatize us, but also things that didn't happen to us traumatize us. And when we look at the list of such childhood adversities, which we call ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, there are 10 key ones. There are so many of them. The 10 key ones include some of the neglect. It can be emotional, security needs. Then abuse. Abuse can be physical abuse, violence. It can be sexual abuse. It also can be things like an incarcerated family member, mother being treated violently or mother being violent, or separation of the parents, aspects like that. Sometimes we don't even notice them as adversities because they are so common in our society that we live in. But do you know that if someone has a score of 4 ACEs, that there's a higher risk them leaning towards certain disorders like depressive disorder, substance abuse, obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. And even worse, do you know that individuals who have been exposed to more than 6 ACEs have a prevalence of and earlier death by 19 years. So you're starting to recognize the topic that we are talking about here is quite serious. Moving forward, now, if we really talk about holistic, integrated coaching, it's important that we are able to actually incorporate the past into the present and then move forward into the future. This is one of the ways of looking at holistic coaching. And trauma-informed coaching provides you this possibility. Now, now I use the words conscious and unconscious a lot. Now, if you look at certain parts of our brain, the neuroscience that we are focusing on today, certain areas like anterior cingulate cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, prefrontal cortex, these are the cerebral cortex, the gray matter that is the outer layer of our brain. And then if you look inside the cerebral cortex, you notice that there are certain components like hippocampus, amygdala, basal ganglia, and so on. These are unconscious. We cannot necessarily directly change or directly think and make a transformation in these areas. Although we feel like that we are in control cognitively, the truth is that we are controlled mostly unconsciously. So we need to recognize that in coaching, mostly we focus on the cerebral brain, if not the cognitive brain. Now you recognize the adversities, trauma experiences, the upbringing, how we grew up, our beliefs, our values, the religion that we grew up with, the belief system culturally, traditionally, socially impact us. And it's almost, this is what we call in some ways being conditioned, right? We are being conditioned. I would like to invite you to look at this analogy. When you look at this image, you notice that there's a snow path. There are some people walking on it. Now, if you were to walk through this path, I'm pretty sure that most of us will take this path that has been taken earlier. The reason is that we know that someone walked through that and that we can see the path forward. That means it appears to be the safest because people have taken this path before, and we might shy away or fear away from extending away from this path because we don't know what lies underneath the snow or what might bring us danger. So our brain is very much like that. When we have experienced trauma, adversities, belief systems, value systems, we tend to embody these things that we have learned. And our brain, interestingly, is an efficient machine. So it's trying to get from one place to the other as fast as possible. And that's how it keeps us safe. That's how it operates. So it uses these conditioned paths on a regular basis. So what happens is every time we use these neural paths, it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's why we use affirmations, for an example. The more we affirm, the more we say something, the more we do something, the more efficacy we build around it, the more we are able to strengthen that neural path. Now, the interesting thing is that this happens in both ways. If we consider things as serving or non-serving, I don't like the words positive and negative. Rather, serving behaviors and non-serving behaviors, both of them tend to have the same exact possibility, which means if we keep strengthening a non-serving behavior or a thought pattern or an emotional pattern, we will strengthen it just like how the snow path is created, regardless of the outcomes. And that's why sometimes when people go in a negative cycle, they end up becoming depressed or anxious, or maybe even developing certain unhealthy behaviors, mental and emotional conditions, which can go into even disorders, mental disorders, emotional disorders, right? So to me, it's almost like we as human beings, it's almost like we are wearing many different types of goggles, sunglasses, glasses, because we are conditioned. We believe in a very specific, strong way that this is the right, this is the wrong. It's almost like we have these glasses that are embedded onto us, embedded into our skin, our brain, our nervous system. So we behave in a specific way because we see the world through specific lenses. We often don't see the world for what it is, but we see things through our biases. And this is something very important that we all need to understand as psychotherapists and professional coaches, and even as individuals, because what we don't know, we don't know. So now coming back. So then what is really transformation? Often, just like the person who is smoking but cannot stop smoking, they are aware. And not only here, even maybe as professional coaches, many of your clients are aware some behaviors that are not serving them, thought patterns, emotions. But they cannot just simply snap their finger with just one aha moment, with some affirmations. By writing a journal, they find it difficult to change. In fact, many of them find it impossible to change. Now, how do we then go from awareness to actualized awareness? Because if someone is aware I shouldn't smoke or it's not serving me, I want to stop smoking. So they actualize the awareness and then they turn around and not smoke. And we know only very few people who have this ability. Most majority of the people find this very difficult, if not impossible. So the question is, what is required? I think probably now you know the answer. So what are some ways of creating true deep transformation in your clients? And I believe it is creating the unconscious transformation, which means the emotional transformation, the nervous system itself changing, being able to interact with basal ganglia, the hippocampus, or the, let's say, the amygdala. If we can directly work with these components, then their automatic signaling, automatic functioning, we can either reduce or we can stop. So when we talk about true deep transformation, here I'm talking about this true unconscious transformation. The person whose amygdala is hyperactive, when they have stress, amygdala is hyperactive. And one of the ways they know how to regulate themselves, if not to cope up, is to take tobacco, to regulate their body for that moment, to relieve that stress. It is a way of sedating their body. The central nervous system is sedated when we take, let's say, certain components in tobacco, or when we take certain uh, alcohol for that matter, right? It sedates us so that we can cope with the stress. Now, you are then starting to recognize the person would know this is the hyperactivity of my amygdala. There's too much cortisol in my body. What I'm doing is sedating myself by taking alcohol. But can they say the same and then just not drink alcohol? That's not the case. So the deeper true transformation requires an unconscious transformation. Often there are many practices that which can catalyze this possibility. For an example, meditation, Kundalini, breathwork. And today we are particularly focusing on psychedelics. Now, when you look at meditation, Kundalini, and breathwork, they're extremely powerful practices. Now, depending on person to person, the time frame can differ how the deep transformation can be evoked. Now, I know some people who, through one breath work or one Kundalini yoga session, who were able to break through those transformations unconsciously. At the same time, but the majority, however, could take years. In fact, when we talk about professional meditators, they might meditate 25 to 30 years to reach some level of this deeper unconscious transformation for that matter. But however, psychedelics gives us a doorway, which is truly a rapid transformation, where we can directly work with our clients' deep unconscious mind, their emotion, their nervous system, and their body. So as I'm starting to now lean towards psychedelics, if you're very new to psychedelic, let us understand what it is. The word psychedelic has Greek origins. And in fact, Greeks used a lot of psychedelics in the past as they were conquering the world for that matter. And not only them, we can find many civilizations, ancient civilizations, using psychedelics for expansion of their mind, altering consciousness, and doing amazing things that sometimes we can't even imagine how they did, even living in a technological era at the moment. So psyche means soul or mind. Delon means to manifest or to reveal. So psychedelon would mean soul manifesting, soul becoming visible, if not mind manifesting, if not mind becoming visible. And I can confirm it is quite literal. Now, if I ask you, have you ever seen the walls of your mind? Have you ever really been able to grasp palpably your nervous system? If you haven't, psychedelics give you this palpable ability to directly interact with your nervous system, directly interact with your mind. In other words, the mind manifests right within yourself in a way that cognitively, consciously, we are unable to access unless we are using a specific practice like meditation for that matter, which also takes many decades. Right. So now, when we talk about psychedelics, there are many different psychedelics. There are certain synthetic psychedelics, and then there are also sacred plant psychedelics. So one of them is magic mushrooms. This quite literally fungi here, psilocybin, right? The scientific term is psilocybin. Often they are referred in layman's term as magic mushrooms or hallucinogenic mushroom. And when they say magic mushroom, it has a reason. The reason is that it has magic. What I mean by that is, please do not get me wrong. I'm a clinician. At the same time, I'm also someone who is very open-minded to mysticism and the unknown. I think it's absolutely very important if we approach our clients, me as a clinician, as well as a professional coach, it's very important that I keep an open mind. I approach every possibility. So I myself have experienced certain mystical possibilities I cannot explain. No research can explain. So I acknowledge magic. Maybe the magic that we know is the illusion that we have seen on the stage, cutting someone in half, and then maybe or stabbing someone with a sword, nothing happened. I'm not talking about that kind of magic. I'm talking about the magic that myself, I have a very strong history of childhood trauma and even as an adult, even as an adolescent, some adverse experiences, from some traumatic experiences. So I numbed my nervous system over many years, almost a decade with alcohol. And please allow me to share this experience with you. When I first went through my psychedelic experience with magic mushrooms, I woke up next day. I asked myself, why do I feel uplifted? Why do I feel I'm excited to go out there into the world and to do what I love the most? I thought, because I had my first ceremony yesterday, second day, same, third day, fourth day, fifth day. Now, by the fifth day, I know that there is no active compound of magic mushroom, which I will introduce in a minute, in my body. I shouldn't be feeling like this. So I took a chance. I checked the sixth day, the same. I did not need alcohol anymore. I was able to fall asleep. I felt more life. I felt vitality. I felt a whisper in my ear to do what I love the most. And on the seventh day, when I stood up from my bed, I first fell on the ground. It makes me even emotional to share this with you right now. The reason being, I realized that this is how it feels to be healthy, especially mentally and emotionally healthy, because I lived a life of trauma responses in depression and in anxiety, although I was at the time an alternative therapist. At the time, being a professional coach, a credential coach, I didn't know the impact it held me, the past held me. So when I fell down, started actually sobbing, for the very first time in my life, I learned how it feels to be mentally, emotionally healthy. I looked around and I thought, oh my God, many people must be feeling like that, which is an absolute new reality for me. Now, if you ask me what I call magic, this I call magic. So I wanted to scream from the roof. I wanted to scream and say that this is possible. The healing can be magical. So I dedicated my life to this practice because I saw it firsthand happening within me, so I knew I can bring this to my clients. So I started training myself as a psychotherapist. I accredited world's first ever trauma-informed psychedelic integration program with ICF. Yesterday, I met another MCC at ICF chapter. He said, Fernando, how did you do that? It's almost like a miracle that you had it accredited. And in fact, my life partner, when I said I'm going to do this, told me that you could lose all your credibility. You might be considered as like a druggie or something like that. Then I told my partner, I have no choice. I have come to learn the deepest truth that I have ever been exposed to. Now I have no choice. So, the world, unfortunately, many psychedelics, including magic mushrooms, are illegal. Luckily, in Thailand, it's possible for us to use for medicinal purposes and research purposes. There are many countries like, for an example, Netherlands, Portugal, and some Caribbean countries, also some parts of the US. Magic mushrooms are legal. And recently in Australia, it became legal for therapeutic purposes. And interestingly, if you look at the drug harm index from from UK, you will notice that alcohol, heroin has some of the highest the harm index, whereas mushrooms, magic mushrooms, literally the last one on this index. In fact, the two impairments that is being discussed here are the altered state of consciousness experience. So moving forward, so you are starting to understand that magic mushrooms is not really as harmful as alcohol for that matter. Alcohol is legal, I think, most parts of the world. And now let's look at magic mushrooms a little bit in depth. Now, when you consume magic mushrooms, first it breaks down from psilocin, the compound in it, into psilocybin to psilocin. Psilocin is very similar to the neurotransmitter, regulatory neurotransmitter, which is serotonin molecule, very, very similar. So in our body, in our nervous system, there are serotonin receptors because we communicate both electronically as well as chemically. So when we communicate through our body to regulate ourselves, we need serotonin in our body. So when we consume psilocybin, instead of serotonin, the serotonin receptors are able to capture psilocin, just like a key opening a lock. It's really a mystical possibility. And when this happens, something quite amazing happens. Now, earlier I told you that we are wearing many glasses. We are very conditioned. And our brain, when you look at neuroscience, there are specific parts of our brain which are responsible for this sense of self. If not, we often hear the ego. Ego is ourselves, self-referential thinking, self-referential understanding, being able to process who we are, understanding who we are, remembering trauma, being able to remember the conditioning, those specific areas, because we are operated based on what we know about who we are, ourselves, our family, our associations, in other words, all the relationships that we have built. This is all hosted in these red color areas that you see in our brain, and we call this default mode network. There are several parts of our brain that come together to form a default mode network. For an example, anterior cingulate cortex, prefrontal cortex, and several other components that come together make us who we are. And they are usually active when we think about ourselves, not when we focus on outside tasks mostly, but when we focus on ourselves, self-referential thinking, this part lights up the default mode network, if not ego. Now, what happens when we take psilocin is quite amazing, fascinating. The default mode network starts reducing its activity. In other words, for a moment, we lose the sense of ourselves. In other words, for a moment, we forget, we dilute this strong sense of self, strong sense of ego. Now, if you're familiar with certain Eastern philosophies like Buddhism, you may know that the Buddhist philosophy invites us to try and reduce our ego in a way that we can see the true nature of who we are. So psilocybin enables us through induction of the integration of it into our body quite literally. And if you may have heard about it, it's called the mystical experience, if not the ego death, the self-referential thinking reduction. I'd like to share with you one of my experiences. Now, when I associated myself, I have this very high ego as who I am. I have this very high sense of myself before I started all of these things. And during one of my very first experiences, I could experience that my body dissolved in this experience. Fernando dissolved in this experience. And all of a sudden, I gained a sense of what I'm made out of. All these atoms that I'm made out of has been in many other things before. It's almost like I was able to experience the tiger teeth, the butterfly wings, the flowers, the dead leaves, everything that I have been before, at an atomic level, at a DNA level. I don't think that I can really explain it to you. So I try to create this little image with AI to help you understand how I felt. I don't think this does the justice to it. But what's most important is the integration component. When I came out of this experience, I immediately felt one with the entire universe. I felt a deep sense of love. I did not no longer felt the importance of myself. I looked at myself in the mirror and I felt compassion like I never felt for myself. I felt a greater sense of equilibrium with the nature. Earlier, I would say I just focused on myself and people around me, and I was a human person. After I came out of this experience, I became a nature person, sorry. I was able to see myself in the gigantic universe, limitless universe, and my place in it, and the role I am playing in it, and how sacred it is. So what does this experience really do then? Right? So when the ego is dissolved, when we are able to connect with the entire being, entire universe, what does that mean? It's very interesting. Now, this is an infographic representation of an MRI image, A diagram being the sober brain, in other words, the placebo brain, B being the psilocybin brain, the inducted state of psilocybin, administered state. And if you notice all these colorful little dots, these are different cortexes of our brain. Now you notice our sober brain has some level of connections, and the psilocybin brain has hundreds of times more, several hundreds of times more connections. So when I experience this connection to the entire universe, actually simply I connected with the cortexes of my brain. If you have heard the experience synesthesia, which means you can experience beyond usual sensory experiences, like being able to see music, being able to experience the fragrance of a sound, for that matter, right? So the synesthesia experience, when we are connected through our brain, all cortexes, in such a way that we are able to dissolve uh, our ego and able to experience something that is mystical, the ego death experience. This is a hyper-connected space. So meaning hyperconnection in our brain indicates neuroplasticity. You know that when we want to make a change, that means we need to change our brain, our nervous system. So if our nervous system is hyperconnected, it's a very high neuroplasticity state where we can cultivate new behaviors, new patterns, new thoughts, new emotions, for that matter. So you are starting to recognize then the psilocybin-induced brain creates a very strong neuroplasticity, which is very conducive for change. Now, let's look at, since this is a 1 hour quick sharing and we only have 10 minutes, may I invite Lux or Leah to share the registration link as well at this point of time? I'm going to quickly walk you through some benefits very briefly. Now, the program that we deliver at Ignite Global, focusing on psychedelic integration and trauma-informed component, is a 18-month program. So you could imagine how little I can share with you in 1 hour. So let me try. Now, during this experience, there's increased neuroplasticity, which means it's changeable. We can change our brain. It disrupts the default mode network. Now we know how, right? I just gave you some glimpses of it so that we can remove all those glasses, beliefs, values, conditions, and trauma responses, all of that, and re-look at ourselves most of the time for the very first time. In one of my experiences, when I first saw myself in the mirror, without this very strong ego, I felt devastated to look at myself because I didn't see Fernando. I saw curious, fearful creature looking back at me in the best possible way. Do not get me wrong. It was one of the most healing moments because what I thought I was, I didn't see. The one I think with the ego, educated, good looking, has this belief that. When I looked at, I saw the true pure innocence of that man, that ape who walked out of the jungle to the urban world, and it completely changed my life. Enhanced brain network integration. You already saw that through the diagram. Enhanced emotional processing, in fact, reprocessing for that matter. Nervous system reset. Often scientists call that psilocybin has the ability to reboot our system, quite literally reboot the system. So we are able to reboot our nervous system, and it increases the brain connectivity with reduced self-referential cognition, because every time we think with what we know. Now, this gives us an opportunity to think, process, feel without what we know. And it's a beautiful, magnificent possibility because we are no longer attached to our the learned behavior. We are forgetting about what we thought who we were. And also deep transpersonal spiritual experiences, spontaneous healing, like what happened. I was uh, drinking myself to sleep every night. I'm not talking about one glass of wine or one bottle of beer. I'm talking about half a bottle of vodka here. And from that to no alcohol next day. Imagine that, right? Spontaneous healing because of the reset in the body. Now, let me not just tell you this. Let me share with you some true insights from here in this case, John Hopkins Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research. Do you know that over 70% of the people who are clinically diagnosed with depression have overcome and has fully remission to the normal mental health range after one psilocybin experience and 11 integration sessions. And people who are experiencing chronic fear and anxiety because of cancer have experienced full remission to 70%, about 70%. Imagine the possibility. Now, you might be saying, Fernando, coaching clients are not depressed or having anxiety. How about them? How about healthy people? Is it useful for them? Yes, absolutely. Do you know that healthy people who go through this experience, over 90% of the people say that it increased their satisfaction, positive regard to themselves, to outside world, their relationships improved, their life overall improved. And in fact, over about 80% of the people say that they can count this experience, the intake, within the right set and setting, therapeutic, structured setting, taking psilocybin, taking psychedelics, they can count within the top most 5, either spiritual experiences or life experiences. So what are some of those other experiences that they can compare with? Death of a close family member, birth of their own child, that they would compare with ingestion of psilocybin in a therapeutic experience. Imagine that. If you ask me, I would say the most beautiful experience I have ever had in my life is my love for my sister, my grandmother, my life partner. The second most powerful experience I have experienced in my life is doubtless is psilocybin experience, and many of them for that matter. It's absolutely so powerful. So what is it then? It's almost like the new snowfall. Now, earlier we had conditioned mind, we use the same paths, but when we take psilocybin with these hyper-connected states, it gives us an opportunity to truly relook at ourselves. Instead of using those old paths, it gives us an opportunity to create new paths. Now, does it make sense? Unconscious change, because our brain is conditioned. We usually use those neural paths, including our amygdala, basal ganglia, all other parts of our brain, unconscious brain, the specifically the subcortical brain. Now, when we take psilocybin, it enables us to create this new awareness in a way like the fresh snow, so we can create new pathways that enable us to cultivate new behaviors. And that's why it worked on me from alcoholic to a healthy person. Many people who smoke to a healthy person, and people who have had experience of depression, anxiety to full remission. Now, if you're wondering, Fernando, what you're sharing sounds very therapeutic, sounds like psychotherapy, sounds like neuroscience. It is true. If you learn systematically as professional coaches, how you are able to integrate this. You might be saying, in my country, it is illegal, Fernando. I cannot do it. I would love to, but I cannot. It's all right. Or maybe you are saying, I'm too afraid to do that with people. I'm not a psychotherapist, so I don't want to do that. I agree with you. We should not to begin with. However, do you know that although it is illegal in many countries, many people self-administer psychedelics because of the power of it? I don't know whether you're connected to the psychedelic community. It's huge. You know that the world has Android users and iPhone users. World is a bit like that. There are people who don't know about psychedelics and people who embrace psychedelics. So a lot of people use it. So even if you didn't administer it, there are so many people looking for coaching. So you as a professional coach can do the preparation part of it in the protocol, and they can administer it by themselves if they wanted to. You can provide them harm reduction aspects and support them, and then you can integrate their experiences to make sense to the real world, because the hallucinations and the mystical experiences need to be integrated to real world. And with this, we can directly work with the deep unconscious mind, our body, and our nervous system. So we truly create a deep transformation in our clients. And there's a lot of psychedelic assisted therapists who work with individuals who have mental disorders, and psychotherapists usually focus on the disorder. But if you partner with them, for an example, with me, you are able to not only support them for their recovery process, healing process, but also further expansion, setting goals, going into a deeper reflective process. And also you can, so that way you can assist them through integration process. Some people microdose psychedelics. We can assist them through their integration process. So coaches have many opportunities, even though it might not even be legal in your country. With that, I want to share with you. If you're curious, if you would like to begin this journey, at the moment at Ignite Global, we provide a 50% discount to our trauma-informed advanced coach practitioner program, which is a prerequisite to go into the psychedelic integration program. If you are interested, have a look. And I would like to leave you with this one last insight from one of my teachers, Roland Griffiths, who left us 2 years ago. He's one of the psychopharmacologists at who was at Johns Hopkins University of Medicine. He says, I have come to think of meditation and psilocybin have been complementary processes for investigation of the nature of mind. And in fact, neuroimaging studies show that they both produce similar changes in brain regions related to sense of self, default mode network. And hear me out. He says, well, if meditation represents the true cause of the investigation of the mind, psilocybin surely represents the crash course. If I put this into layman terms, when professional meditators who have been meditating 25 to 30 years experience psilocybin, they say that they were never able to reach such a powerful ego dissolution experience through meditation, but with as little as 1.5 grams of this fungi that is right there outside in our ecosystem can create such profound states. So you're probably now starting to think that's why most governments, most systems don't want people to have access to it. For an example, not every, but some big players of the pharmaceutical world, because you know how the medical system works. You know, unfortunately, I am a clinician and I'm saying this with responsibility. There's many higher powers that are controlling, systematically controlling us, wouldn't want this to become fully legal and available to people. I don't mean it should be freely available to everyone and anyone. I think it should be available in controlled settings, but it must be available for therapy. That's my belief, based on my own change and hundreds of clients I have worked, the patients I have worked with. So with that, I would like to thank all of you for joining me today, and we are ending the session at right on time. And please feel free to share any insights in the chat room, as well as in the registration form itself, if you would like to us to feature you. So once again, thank you very much. And I hope this sharing may have evoked some curiosity, and I hope you are walking away with some insight today. And I'm so grateful that you shared this space with me. Once again, I wish you a wonderful International Coaching Week, and I wish you all the success and everything your heart is singing for. And thank you for being part of Ignite Professional Community. I look forward to bringing you more sessions in the future. In fact, tomorrow I'm talking about team coaching, organizational development. If you're interested, join us. With that, I would like to say goodbye to all of you, and let's keep in touch. Thank you. Leah, I think, Leah, do you have right on top of your list the link for session tomorrow?
Yes, I'll send it in 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you.